Hey everybody, it's Tripl-L coming to talk about Dan Machi Season 3. We begin the new saga, the saga with the talking monsters. It's gonna be great. This thing goes on for 3 novels at least. Anyway, hey everyone, we're back to Dan Machi. If you watched the channel before and you've watched my previous Dan Machi videos, you know Dan Machi is one of my favorite series. And of course, for my favorite series, I have the ever so wonderful volume 9 of Danmachi. Apologies, I was just looking at something. So volume 9 of Danmachi, that's what we're currently covering. Yeah, it's gonna be a pretty good video here. I'm gonna let you know from the beginning that this episode ends up covering about 77 pages of the Danmachi novel, and we will talk about the little things that got missed at the end of the video. Before that though, we're gonna just very quickly cover my top moments for the episode, what I personally really enjoyed. And I realized I really liked the episode. I realized that I thought the episode was really cute because a lot of these moments are just cute moments, but I got like 9 or so moments just to go through right here. So let's just begin and we'll talk about the review here. So my first top moment here was Wiene and Bell meeting, and I also so my first top moment here was Wiene and Bell meeting. So this is a pretty big moment. Now the anime didn't cover some little details here, but it's not too bad. But I really enjoyed the moment because of how Bell operates in the moment. You don't really get a full sense of what Bell was thinking. I mean, knowing the character, you can kind of make some guesses. But what was really interesting was how he got the other adventurers to leave. So the first thing that Bell did was he was like, yo, give me a potion. This poor girl's hurt. So these adventurers are like, these are the common negative adventurers, the deplorables in the adventuring community. So naturally the idea here was he's asking for the potion because then if these guys hear that, they're gonna be like, oh, I don't want to help a loser kind of thing. It's really interesting. It was a really interesting mechanic, but what was really cool about that moment was just showing how Bell understood the mentality of the general adventurer. And it's still kind of unfortunate that the majority of the general adventure are like these people that we encountered at the beginning of the episode. Second top moment was the moment where everyone responds to Bell harboring a monster, and he gets called, the moment where he gets called a monster fetishist, and the moment where Wiene speaks, that whole little scene there. So what's really interesting here was just how quickly everyone kind of reacted. So this scene was really important because it establishes the baseline for even the tolerant people when it comes to monsters. It establishes that this is seen as something perverse, and it establishes that there are people already that are doing perverse things. Now, I do want to remind you, there was an event called Monsterphilia a while back in Danmachi. It was, I think, in Season 1, I believe. So just keep that in mind, because there is already some stigma going on here. But if you didn't notice, when you see the narration at the episode talking about, at the beginning of the episode, sorry, talking about the nature of humans and monsters, you have to realize that what this arc is going to be doing, it's going to be establishing the relationship between monsters and humans and how that ultimately is going to go into the future. As you can see in the episode, there's a lot of talk, well, especially when you have fells in them. There's clearly something going on when it's about the talking monsters, and I think you did have Uranus speaking a little bit about what he hopes to see here. But ultimately, it was a good moment just because it's the moment that tells you how Bell's party feels about monsters, and it gives us another good baseline. My next top moment is a really small moment, but I love it because it kind of captures, or it reminds you of characterization. It's specifically the moment where Bell was coming up with a name for the dragon girl, the Vivre, I believe it's called. And he came up with a name that Haruhime tells him, hey, like that's the name from a myth, a tale. And so what was really cool there is just like this reminds you that this is Bell and Haruhime's specific commonality. They both like stories of heroics. So it's definitely no wonder that Haruhime is the second person that Wiene attaches herself to, because when you consider that, you consider these two are technically coming in from a relatively similar moral standpoint. That is, their morals are based on what heroes should be doing, kind of thing. It's a funny little commonality, and I think it was a great way of reminding us that these two are linked by that shared passion. My next top moment was the monster stealing equipment rumor. We saw this when Welf was going out during the, what would you call that, information gathering sequence. So I like this moment just because it establishes something for the future. Now we have, of all the information that we got, that is legitimately good information. We're talking about talking monsters. They're taking stuff. We see in the opening that there are monsters running around with armor and weapons. So clearly we know this is going to be a relevant plot point. It was cool to have it. My next top moment, or like collection of moments, were pretty much any moment where Haruhime and Wiene were bonding. So this is another situation where the anime didn't really cover the profoundness or the depth of the emotion that was going on, but it was ultimately a very cute sequence of events. Like, you have a pretty good sense of what's going on. You can clearly see at some points that Haruhime wants to get the girl's attention. You clearly see the other point that she did eventually manage to secure the girl's attention, and you ultimately see the reward being Hestia saying that Haruhime could be a mother kind of thing, and we see how Wiene like hides behind Haruhime. There was an imagery going on in the original novel, just kind of making it seem like Haruhime and Bell were parents and they were taking care of a little girl, Wiene. Now, I will say though, now we're talking about child. I thought Wiene was gonna be taller. It seems like the anime chose to make her more childlike. Like, I'm just looking at it. I'm looking at the illustrations here for the original, and it doesn't really look like she's meant to be so childish. But this is the problem. It's just an issue of illustrations, and the reason that she might look a little bit older in the novel might be because it's is it wrong to try to pick up girls in a dungeon? I guarantee you, when Bell first saw this girl, he had some kind of comment about how beautiful she was. That's the real problem there. When you have that kind of rhetoric possibly going on, especially in this book where it's just about how beautiful girls are. I mean, again, title of the book. When you have this kind of stuff going on, you can understand why they would age her up. But if you remove Bell's monologues, then you're not going to get that part where Bell talks about someone being beautiful. So that's it's an interesting thing. I'll have to reread just to make sure that he did do it. But let me just see if I can show you an image here. So that's the one of the images that we have of her, and that does not look like a that doesn't look like a child. And it's kind of hard. It's just really hard with the illustrations for this novel. I'll check the other novel, see if we can get a better size of what the novel originally wanted her to be at. But she is legitimately very childlike in the novel in general. Like, the characterization is maintained such that giving her a childlike body, I don't think is a problem. I might be misremembering it too. I found that part interesting. That was definitely the most interesting part. Just because the illustrations made her seem more like she was Belle's age, and you know. Okay, so I dug around in the back over there, and nah, there aren't that many images, so I can't say. I think this is a better move though. If we are saying that she looked older in the light novel illustrations, I think this is a better move overall because she's childlike as a disposition. I think that's the better move, and it's not creepy since you don't have any Belle monologues going in there. Although again, I don't recall if Belle actually had one of those monologues. Moving on to the next top moment. The scratch on Bell. This was actually a pretty big event because Bell philosophized about it a lot in the volume. But yeah, this was an important moment because this just reminds you of her nature. That was the rhetoric that was going on in that particular moment. It reminds you that, oh, she is a monster at the end of the day. Now, what is valuable though there is that Bell ultimately tried to console her. I think there was a moment where she tried to pull away and then Bell still grabbed her. So this was just that moment of saying, like, you know, I recognize that you are still a danger. Like, you are fundamentally a danger. There was definitely a talk about how monsters were fundamentally incompatible because of just those little things, that she's stronger than she thinks. But it was ultimately a moment that when Bell sees her crying, he like tells himself like, well, shit, you know, she's crying. She is a regular girl in that regard. So this moment is one that shows you that even though that nature of being a monster is there, Bell still saw beyond it. Here's a bonus top moment, the bathing scene. I really like that scene because of Belle's scream. I think it was really hilarious. The next moment, top moment, was Wiene touching Belle with her newly filed claws. This was just a cute moment. When you have the poor girl suffering there, you see that there's ways to work around it. What that moment ultimately tells you is that things can be dealt with, things can be mitigated, things can be reduced. It just helps. It just tells you that with proper care, there is a way forward for people and monsters to get along. My next top moment was just everyone reflecting on what they had saw for the day. You know, you had Haruhime saying like, well, she kind of agrees with Belle. You had Mikoto being a little bit more lukewarm, and then you had someone like Lily who was fully against everything that was going on. It just shows the different perspectives that are going on in this particular situation, and it also does say that the characters are changing because of this new stimulus that is in their environment, that being Wiene. And there is some interesting talk about how the gods keep things to themselves and all that coming from Lily. And then my final top moment is how Wiene was born. I think it's pretty clear that when you see her talking about her dreams, it's pretty clear that she has some kind of old memory. It's pretty clear to me that there seems to be some kind of recycling system occurring within the dungeon. So in that regard, that moment's really important because it gives us an idea of how the universe is kind of working right now. So definitely a top moment. Anyway, those are my top moments for the episode. And now let's talk about the general review for the episode. Overall, I think really solid. In terms of what's been skipped, there are a few small details that are being skipped. The majority of them are actually at the beginning. So let me just very quickly take you through those beginning details, and then we'll talk more about the episode. But there's a lot of things going on in that first bit. One thing that was skipped was how Wiene was born. And so the way she was born, I think she just came out of the dungeon the same way other monsters do, but she came out in a very pronounced way. It covered a little bit more of her fears. The next thing is that you had Bell there, and he was dealing with these giant firebirds, right? The team was originally in the dungeon in the tree labyrinth. They are there specifically to cull those firebirds, or they were fighting the firebirds, or they knew that the firebirds were there. I don't recall exactly, but the cloak that they were wearing was a cloak that had fire resistance. So they knew they were going to be dealing with the birds. I believe that they took the cloaks because they knew about the birds that inhabited that layer. So that's good to know. The other thing that this is actually a very interesting point. Did you notice that the girl, the Vivre, she has a little bit of a gem on her forehead? That's actually why the people were hunting her down. That gem is ridiculously valuable. What's interesting is how the anime didn't fixate on the gem as opposed to fixating on the claws. Now, mind you, the claws had a big moment. That's why they're going to show up there. But in the novel, that gem is essentially the symbol of her monster nature along with the claws. And what's going on here is actually a very interesting little, I think, phenomena. I think it makes sense that the anime opted to not emphasize that gem as much as it could have. The reason being is that the gem makes more sense in the perspective of a light novel where you need readers to fundamentally understand something about a character. The gems and her claws, well, mostly the gem, because that's a unique feature because all monsters have claws. The gem is a striking feature such that when a reader reads about this gem on her forehead, they can think, oh shit, yeah, the girl with the gem on her head. And I think another thing that they focused on was also her eyes, because her eyes have a really pretty color. But yeah, those are her monstrous features, and that gem in particular is super valuable. So that's why her in particular, as a Vivre, is valuable to adventurers. Now, what's going to be interesting here is that when you have the gem representing financial gain, you can definitely rest assured that that gem is going to factor into some rhetorics in the future in terms of like minor rhetorics. So it's going to be interesting to see how the anime deals with that. They're going to have to tell us at some point that the gem is valuable. They could have done it at the very beginning with the adventurers and have them tell us like, hey, let's rip off that gem from her face, because that would tell you exactly that she's valuable. But just keep that in mind. At this point, at the very beginning of the story, you would have had the sense that that gem was valuable. And I don't think that's too much of a spoiler, because I think this is going to be one of the spots that the anime kind of glosses over. So this is just probably a detail you're going to get. Anyway, you need to know why she was being chased, and it's because of the gem in her forehead. Now, are there any other moments at the beginning part that need to be that were glossed over? Maybe small moments. So I said at the beginning that this thing covered like what, 70 pages of the novel. The question is like, how much stuff got skipped? Well, here's the thing. Actually, not that much. The thing with Dan Machi, and if you guys watch my videos, you know I always say this. Bell is a really powerful narrator. Like, he monologues a lot. So what ends up happening is actually pretty funny. When I was watching the episode, it didn't feel as deep to me. And the reason for that's pretty clear. If you look at Bell in the episode, he seems pretty generic. He's just a nice guy. He's an all-loving hero. That's what you see as a viewer. You just see Bell getting cut, his arm is shredded, and he's still being nice. You see all of that. Everyone else are the people that are having doubts. But Bell himself is also having doubts. Bell has doubts all the time. So what ends up happening is that Bell monologues so much that he monologues about every single doubt he has and about how he's overcoming his doubts. So that is the unfortunate thing when it comes to the internal monologues, is that you don't actually get the full proper picture of how much conflict Bell has throughout the entire thing. Like when Bell gets clawed, you can definitely believe that Bell philosophizes about those claws for a while, and he talks about the nature of the claws and the nature of the girl crying in front of him. Like he has a lot more of a rich internal thought process. The kid is fraught with conflict that he overcomes because he's chasing the idea of what it means to be a good person. So that is the unfortunate thing, that you kind of lose out on that degree of Bell. But this is something that we've always lost out on in the anime. Like the anime has always been, unfortunately, flattening Bell's thought process because, again, it's so hard to animate narration. Narration will always be the biggest challenge when you're going from light novel to anime, and there's just no easy way around it. The only way to fight with this kind of stuff is to use really expressive facial expressions, but you don't really get that in this episode. The one who gets the most attention here is really Wiene, because they have to show all her expressions because she's a cute girl, and you don't really get to see much of the hints of Bell's internal conflict. Now mind you, sometimes it'll still come out, but it's not as rich as light novel Bell. Now, is that bad? I don't know. Because as a reader, I can fill in the details, and but for an anime viewer, you'll probably just see Belle as a flat, generic, all-loving character. Now, mind you, chances are this might get a little bit harder later on, maybe with how different situations get painted later on. But it's always a little bit of a toss-up because the anime has removed some pretty critical details from Belle before. And so when you're removing those critical details, like you're also removing the most interesting parts to talk about. The majority of Belle's interest comes in his internal monologues, which just really puts us in a tough situation here. Sometimes I think, like honestly, sometimes I think Danmachi probably would have been better as a sorry, not light novel, as a manga first, because one of the main comparisons I always make, it's always between Izuku and Bell, and I'm always willing to say that Bell is a better Izuku archetype type character than Izuku is, but that's only true for light novel Bell, because Izuku, you have a pretty good sense of Izuku's conflicts, but that's because because a manga is already naturally more expressive. A manga doesn't have the virtue of intense narration like a light novel does. So a manga already has to set up a way to make a character like Izuku, his doubts, more palpable. And unfortunately, that's what ultimately gives Izuku an edge over Anime Bell, because Anime Bell doesn't have the same kind of exposure that a manga character gets. It's hard to actually paint Bell's internal conflict when you're just taking it from narration to anime. And it's always really interesting to see it. It's always really interesting to see how it unfolds. It's always interesting to see what the anime skips. But it also makes me a little bit sad just because Bell feels a little bit flatter. Regardless, this is still a solid episode. Like, Bell's still serviceable. And everything else going on in the episode is really good. Like in one episode, you find out about how everyone went about gathering information. You know that this is a relatively new environment. You see Fells and you see Orenos, and they clearly are people that have more information. Hermes clearly has more information, and we find out about a new family at the end of the episode. So really, we have a lot of good stuff going here. The anime opening is also super spoilery. It's really funny how spoilery it is, but that's par for the course. It's going to be an exciting season for sure, and I am definitely interested. I think maybe I'll do like casual comparisons, like just to tell people like what other details are missing. But it's honestly just pages upon pages of narration. That's what's really just lost here. Pages upon pages of narration, and just Bell philosophizing about the nature of monsters and humans. So not the worst deal that you've ever gotten from an adaptation. Anyway, everyone, let me know what you thought down below. Let me know what you personally enjoyed. Like I said at the beginning, I think this was a super cute episode. I think Wiene is just super cute. I like their interactions. Like, they do look like a family when it comes to Bell, Wiene, and Haruhime. And it's just, it was neat to see that whole thing unfold. So everyone, let me know what you thought down below, and until next time, I hope you have an absolutely great day.